Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about user-defined function basics. So what are functions? Functions are constructs that allow us to take pieces of code that we use in many different places and make a definition for it and call on that over and over. So this helps us in a couple of ways. For one, it reduces the file size. If you have to write a series of statements over and over every time you need to use them, you're going to get a long file essentially. So what this allows us to do is make one block of code and then call it in different places. So the bulk of the code is just going to be in one place. So it also helps us out in that we reduce error. So the way we reduce error, of course, is if we're typing it in over and over and over, that gives us plenty of chances to fat finger a key or something like that, make a mistake, and then we'd have to trace that and find it, and that's a bit of a pain. So isolating the same piece of code in one place helps you reduce the number of errors that you're going to have. So let me pull up our handy dandy VS Code, and I've explained a bit of that up here in the top comments. I want you to be able to see that. Some of the vocabulary that we're going to use here, first of all, function. What is a function? A function is a named series of statements. So by that, what I mean is we're going to give it a name, and then following that, we're going to have a colon because it's going to be followed by a block of statements. And those statements are going to make up the body of the function. The function's the name plus the block of statements is the function definition, as we described here in number 2. So not only do we have a name for it and a bunch of statements, but sometimes in order to make this useful, we need to be able to send information into it so it can be processed. So we have what we call parameters. So a parameter is essentially an input. It's like a variable in the function definition. So if you look down here at def sum parameters, we have parameter 1, parameter 2, parameter 3. So these are the 3 parameters, or in other words, variables that we're going to be using. And then we have something called a function call. A function call is this right here, which is the sum parameters. Also print right here, that's a function call. So sum parameters is how you actually make use of this function. And then we have something called an argument. So on the receiving end, you've got parameters. On the sending end, we call these arguments. So the arguments that are being sent to the function, and they're being bound to the parameters. In other words, when I send in 1, 2, or 3 as parameters here, parameter 1 becomes 1, parameter 2 becomes 2, parameter 3 becomes 3. And then the last thing that we have in here is a return. And the return allows you to return a single value to whatever called it. So over here, I've got a print statement that is calling our sum parameters function. So it's going to return this value to us, the summation of the 3 things. Now it's going to come back to here, and then we'll print it out. So if we were to go over here and print it, we would see right here that it would print out the value of 6. So that works as we would expect. Let's do a quick clear down here. So so as we mentioned, the arguments are bound to the parameter. Arguments, they can be expressions. They don't have to be just simply 1. We could have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 sent in as an argument to parameter 1. So this would be 6. So if you run it, then you'd have 6 plus 2 plus 3. So you're going to get a different. Well, actually, hold on. Here we're going to have 3, 6, 10. 10 sent with 2 and 3. They're going to be summed together and bring you back to 15. So we don't need any parameters at all, actually. We could do something without parameters. And often you can do that to, let's say, have a print statement that prints a welcome or something like that. Or maybe you want a multi-line print statement to say, hey, welcome to this program, blah, blah, blah. You can do that by having just a print. You can call your function print heading or something like that. Just have it print some stuff out. So that's the essentials of what a function looks like. Let's go down here. I've got some more notes here. You've been using functions all along. You've been using input. You've been using print. You've been using things like int to convert a string to an integer. You've used the len function. These are all system-defined functions. But what we're talking about now is user-defined. In order to make a user-defined function, we start with this keyword here, def. So def is what you put in front of your function name. Then you have your parameter names. Then you have a colon to let us know that we're about to have a series of a block of things after it. And then we end the block with return, and that's going to return the one thing. We don't actually have to have a return here. If we don't have a return, it implicitly returns the none keyword here, none, which is basically meaning it's got nothing there. So one thing to keep in mind is naming conventions. When we name a function, we want to make it very explicit as to what the function does. So we try to put that in plain English, and we'll take words, we'll keep them all in lowercase, and we'll separate the words with an underscore to make it readable. And then we also, if you want to return, sometimes you need to return more than one value. Maybe you want to return like a summation of things, but also an average. How would you do that? You can use a tuple, and you can just unpack the tuple on the way back. So we could do something like return, two values there. We could have the average, and we could do something like this, and then have the other thing be the average of those things together. Let me do this real quick. So if we do something like this, then we send back the, hold on, the, that did not work. I've been going between Windows and Mac a bit, so I'm hitting the wrong copy keys here. So if we take that and we divide that by 3, and then we try to return that, that's going to return a tuple. And then if we, at the other end, instead of doing, we'll do some parameters, but we're going to print, it should print a tuple. So let's go ahead and hit the print, and you'll see that it does return that tuple. So if we wanted to unpack that at the other end, instead of just printing it, we could say that, oops, let's say num1, or well, actually we'll say summation, and then average equals some parameters, and we'll give it 1, 2, and 3. And if we do that, we should see that, oh wait, we're not printing it, so that's going to look boring, won't it? So we'll just do print summation, and then we can go and print our average and see what that looks like. So we hit print, there we get it. We get our summation, which is 6, and we get 2. So that's how we talked about this in our last lesson. It's called unpacking. And unpacking allows us to get multiple values back, or assign multiple values from a tuple or other type of container. So that's what we're doing here. We're unpacking that. So continuing on with the lesson here, if you return nothing, the function returns the actual thing none. So if we were to do something, let's test that out real quick. Let's comment this stuff out here and see what happens if we define something, let's call it return nothing. And we just say, yeah, we can use this thing called pass, and pass allows us to essentially do nothing. So we're gonna just put, hold on, I've done something wrong. Oh, yes, it's complaining. I forgot my parentheses because we need to do that. I'm gonna put pass there. Pass means essentially do nothing. It's a placeholder, and we'll talk about that in future lessons, but I'll just put that there for now. And then if I come over here and I print return nothing, and I use the parentheses there because I'm calling the function, if I hit run here, we get none back. So see, we didn't actually return anything. We don't have an explicit return, but if we don't, it implicitly returns the none value. So let's see. So you can use return anywhere in a function, and it can also appear multiple times, but you're only going to execute it one time. So if you have, let's say, if else statements in here, each one can have a return as the result of it, or in the block under it. But you're only going to be hitting one of those one time, because after you hit that return, you're returning from the function. So keep that in mind. And the last thing to know about these are we have hierarchical function calls. So let me comment out the code here so I can explain this. So in a hierarchical function call, all this essentially means is that we have a nested function call. You go into the innermost, which will be the input here, and then the result of this is going to be fed to the outer function call, which is the int, and that result is going to be fed to the the function call on that. So it's basically a nesting of your function calls. So it'll go from the innermost to the outermost. So if we hit play here, we'll see it's asking for an input. Let's say I'll put 8. So what's happening there is it inputs, we give it 8, it turns it into an integer, then it sends that integer to print, and print is actually going to implicitly turn that back into a string and print it out as an 8 here. So, and also, if we were to go over here and take a look at num, what does num give us? What do you think it's going to give us here? Let's take a look. So we go and we say 9. So 9 is going to give us none. And why is that? Because print doesn't have a return value to it. It does something, but it doesn't have a return value. So it gives us none implicitly. So num here is equal to none, and it'll print that here. So we get our printing of 9, which is what this does, and then it prints num, which is none. So that is pretty much what you need to know about basic function calls, or basic function structure. We have what we talked about before. We have the function, we have the function definition, we have the parameters, we have the arguments that get passed into the parameters, and we have the function calls, the way we actually utilize the function by calling it with what we call a function call. So this is functions. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask me. I'm quite happy to. So email me, get in touch with whatever way you need to. If you need to go through a hands-on demo of this, feel free to let me know, and I'll set up a one-on-one Zoom with you. Have a great day.